just for information, if I'm asking Council Member Wong, who's also Lisa, a question, I'll use Council Member Wong. How's that? That way we don't get this confused.
Sounds good.
We'll do the roll call.
Yes. Chair Barton?
Here.
Commissioner Blees?
Here.
Commissioner Geldman?
Here.
Commissioner Mungy?
Here.
Councilmember Wong?
Here.
Commissioner Weiss?
Here.
Commissioner Warren?
All righty, thank you. We have a quorum. So first item is to adopt the agenda. Does anyone have any items they want to add for discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll move to adopt.
Who was that?
That was Rick.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Now, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Okay, then all those in favor will say aye, opposed nay when Lisa does the roll.
Commissioner Chair?
Aye.
Excuse me, Chair Barton?
Aye.
Commissioner Blees?
Aye.
Commissioner Geldman?
Aye.
Commissioner Monge?
Aye.
Commissioner Weiss?
Aye.
Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
Alrighty, that's adopted. We have no minutes. I assume we'll be approving the February 25th minutes at our April meeting.
Correct. We did, Chair Barton, we did not receive those from Time Savers yet.
Okay, no problem. Then it's a meeting open to the public. So if we have anyone here who wants to bring something to the commission that we won't be discussing on the agenda, now would be the time to do it. So if there is anyone, please, I guess, raise your hand using the little raise hand option, and Lisa will unmute you, and then you'll just give your name and address, if you would, for the record, and provide whatever input you'd like. So do we have anyone?
Yes, Lisa, it looks like John has raised his hand.
Okay. Oh, sorry. And I'm looking for the attendee. Okay, John, you should be able to talk.
John Schmall, 2750 Chisholm Avenue. I had other things to cover until I started reading the agenda, and the Shoreland area was number one off, and being a shoreland property owner on the beautiful, clear, spring-fed lake known as Casey Lake. Anything that comes up on this, I am concerned. I just would like to bring to the attention of the members of the commission that maybe 5 years ago they did an update on the code, and what happened during that time without informing anyone on the lakeshore owners, of which there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that whose property actually touches the lake around Casey Lake. We had to get together and say, what are you doing to us? In that case, the commission and the council adopted the DNR regulations as written without informing any of the property owners of what was going on. And Casey, being a natural environment lake, had a setback of not the usual 75 feet, but the setback of 150 feet. So that, for my particular piece of property, that put the setback from the lake shore up over the top of my house and 25 feet in front of my house. So I was in a position, or any of us that were covered by this, were in a position of having basically our property rights taken away because we could do nothing to the footprint of the house based on that acceptance without informing us in the slightest. So at all. So we had to do the get together and appear at the council, because if you go as one person, you don't get anything done. But anyway, I had to contact the DNR, and the person in charge of this said it wasn't the DNR's position that we should cause this kind of a problem to properties that have existed for, at that time, over 40 years. So it was supposedly changed to 75 feet, which would allow, I was thinking of building a bigger deck, which I would have been prohibited from doing anything to this house. The footprint was the footprint, and that was the end of it. So now that I read about this Shoreland, I'm looking for some explanation as to just what changes are being made, that I can see what kind of limitations, new limitations, might be provided or be applied to my property that would cause me some heartburn. And looking at some of the numbers, first of all, there are no open pieces of property where anyone can build, either on Silver or Casey. It doesn't exist. So these numbers might not apply to any of these lots. I just don't know. So I'm looking for some advance notification, and I don't think it'll be so onerous to let 5 people know what your changes are going to be and what effect they will be on the 5 people on the natural environment lake.
Okay, well, that is something that is part of our discussion topic for tonight. So there will be more detail as the planner goes through the proposed changes. So I think that will help clarify things. But I do take your point regarding the potential notification of those property owners right adjacent, or who touch the lake, so to speak. So we'll keep that in mind as we go forward and do the public hearing portion of any recommended changes.
I would add that it's more than just the people that live on the lake. It's also the next tier back.
Yeah, exactly.
Those of us, there are 2, there's the riparian and the non-riparian.
Right, right. And both, like I say, that will be discussed more during that period, coming up shortly in the meeting.
Okay, well, I don't have time to stay on the meeting. I just want to let it be known that notifying 5 people directly as to the effect shouldn't be onerous.
Okay.
And as the last go around, when we had our own city planner, when I brought this up and asked why we weren't notified, I was told that, it was all in the fine Lily News, that it was that widely read newspaper, or it was posted in the city hall. It was a very frustrating time, to say the least. Very frustrating. So when I saw something about Shoreland and rights and widths and whatnot, I hearkened back to 5 years ago when it wasn't a very good time. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Anyone else?
Chair Barton, we do not have any other raised hands.
Okey doke. Then we'll move on to, I don't have public hearings, we don't have any action items, so we'll go back down to old business, which is the continuation of the zoning code review. So I will turn it over to Planner Eric.
Thank you. Well, I hope Mr. Smalls is still on the line because unless Chair Barton, you direct otherwise, I'll just go through basically the order in the staff report. So the first item is the discussion of the Shoreland Ordinance. This is here because of the question or the concern that changing the lot width in the R2 or well in all the zoning districts, but any of the zoning districts could have an impact in the shoreland. Chair Barton, to your point, and I think Mr. Geldman brought it up as well, this would affect everybody within 1,000 feet of those two lakes. This is not a consideration of just the riparian lots. This would be everybody within 1,000 square feet. So basically, we could address the issue of allowing additional lots or narrower lots within the shoreland district one of two ways. We could remove the proposed narrowing of the lot width throughout the city, and then that affects everybody. Or we could implement a lot width requirement within the Shoreland Ordinance, and it is the more restrictive of the two ordinances would apply. So it would only affect people within the Shoreland Ordinance. Also to Mr. Small's comment, this, if approved, would have no effect on R1 and R2 zone properties within the Shoreland District because the current minimum lot width is 60 feet. So it would maintain the existing, wouldn't impose any new restrictions. So as I stated a little bit in my memo, but you can see on the table, shoreland districts determine widths and areas in kind of a different way than zoning districts. It's by the type of housing. It's not by the zoning district. So you see on the table, it only affects single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, or quads. Any other type of building would not have this lot width and lot area requirement. Then it would just be the underlying zoning district. But essentially, the two tables are proposed to be the same and essentially mirror what's in the code today. So the lot area is dependent upon the number of dwelling units. So it would maintain the 60-foot lot width and the current 5,967 square foot lot area. And then we could amend the underlying zoning districts, and the area within the shoreland district is treated the exact same as it is today. So with that, I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions or comments about that.
Eric, do you know the setback requirements now in the shoreline overlay districts?
I do not offhand, but we are not proposing to change it from what it is.
Right, it is what it is. Right?
Eric?
Yep.
It looks to me that for riparian lots, there would be a wider lot requirement than this. It's 75 shown on the proposed in the proposed tables for riparian lots, whereas non-riparian is at 60. So that would be a change.
that's a good point. On the riparian lots, it would be 15 feet wider. That was mirroring the state ordinance that theirs were 15 feet wider. That's a very good observation.
Now, going further down in the table in the riparian lots, if seems like R1 has the 60-foot lot width. Now, for a duplex or a two-family property, that would be a significant change.
It would be 15 feet wider.
No, for the duplex. I assume the duplex equates to the two-family situation. So it would have to be 135 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, this is just a draft, so this was just an example. You want these numbers differently, all you have to do is direct me to do that.
What is the change that is proposed in this draft, or is this a completely new table?
Correct. There is no, it's the A above. Currently, it just reads lot area and width standards are regulated by the underlying zoning district. So there are no tables. This would add these tables.
But there would be nothing to prevent us from doing the riparian as 60 feet in width as well, as it currently is. Correct?
Right.
Yep. I don't know. One step we'd have to do if we want to move forward is we have to notify the area hydrologist. I tried to mirror the pattern in the model ordinance, but I think one argument to make it 60 feet would be the current standard is whatever the underlying zoning district is for even riparian lots. So,
and 60 feet was approved before, so there's no reason it wouldn't. I can't imagine why it wouldn't be if we just kept that the same.
That would be my argument if we propose this to be 60 foot for riparians as well. Would be it's keeping the status quo, even though we would change the underlying district for the areas outside of the shoreline. Yep.
Well, and if we go back to the reason we talked about changing the underlying districts, it really was for lot split purposes. Because we do have some lots that are larger, maybe 100 feet in width. And that was really just a way to address that fact and have the potential out there that people could split a lot.
Yep.
Right. And really in the Shoreland overlay district, trying to accomplish with the tables, I believe what we're trying to do is to keep from having too much development occur near the lake, which causes a degradation of the water quality and the value of the lake itself. And it seems like the original discussion was about, okay, well, maybe we ought to look at, okay, if we go from allowing a 50-foot split lot, allow people to split a 100-foot lot into two 50-foot lots, do we want to do that on the lake as well? It's currently at 60. And then vice versa, do we want to make it wider? I guess I wanted to mainly point out, the purpose is to help, keep the water quality or keep the lake, maintain the quality of the lakes.
I mean, my preference would be just to have them both at 60. because that is what it is now, and I don't see a point, especially if a lot of them are currently 60, of having them now be less than what's required in that area. So I would prefer to keep it at 60 for the single, for both the riparian and non-riparian. As
Did
far
you
as
say 50 or 60?
60, where it is
60?
now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The duplex, triplex, and quad, I'm not, as certain about.
Yeah. I don't know how those translate
Yeah.
to other lots. I know the duplex one would create some situations where we've got two family houses being built on R1 properties that outside of the Shoreland area could be built on a 50-foot wide lot. Are we looking to restrict that for the Shoreland area?
Well, I think that's probably the reason this is done by the household size, is my guess. This isn't, by whether it's a townhome or anything. So I do think it does have to do with just the household.
Yeah, how much impermeable surface you end up with.
Yeah.
If you're likely going to have two driveways and
Yeah.
Additional impervious surface.
Yeah. Or even a parking area in some cases where you get up to the larger.
Yep.
Like quad and so forth.
And a point of clarification. On page 9 of your report,
Page 9.
page 9,
Okay.
where it states 50-foot lots for a single-family home.
This table?
You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A single-family residential district.
50-foot lot. Well, you forgot to change the square footage from a 60-foot lot and 7,920 square feet. What's the
Yeah.
typical length of a lot in North St. Paul?
I guess I don't know that offhand. What's the this was what we reviewed at the last meeting. Do you think it should be narrower?
No.
Smaller?
Less square feet.
You're talking about the square feet per dwelling unit or the lot size, or what exactly are you referring to?
The R1 lot area?
R1 lot area is now 7,920 square feet.
Right.
So that means if the lot is 50 feet wide, it has to be 160 feet deep
Right.
to meet that square footage. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. That's what I want to know. Is that typical in North St. Paul? I think you gotta correct it. You gotta change the square foot as long as you change the width. You also have to change the square feet.
Okay. I can do that.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep. So to finish the conversation with the Shoreland, are we good to essentially, well, I guess with the lot width, do we want to keep the lot area matching the 9 riparian as well? I mean, essentially what I could do is I could just remove the 2 riparian columns and just leave it be Shoreland lot area and Shoreland lot width, and it's for any parcel regardless of whether it's riparian or not.
Yeah.
Certainly simplifies it.
Yeah.
So that's the direction. Everybody's, oh, well, this is the wrong page. I need the next page, sorry. This page. So then we'll just have these sets of standards for both lakes.
Right now, at least, the recreational and the natural environment lake tables are the same.
Correct.
Right.
So, I mean, you could condense it down quite a bit, but that doesn't give us a chance to discuss whether or not we want to make a distinction between the two.
Well, this would be your opportunity to
Right.
discuss that. Now that, locally, do you feel, the two lakes are that different that you want to regulate them differently for lot sizes and lot areas?
Well, they are different. There's no, just from the, geography around them.
Mm-hmm.
But, we're a well-developed city, and there, most of the properties are developed. So there aren't a lot of vacant spaces. So I'm not certain there's a need to regulate them differently.
Okay. Is that the consensus of the Planning Commission?
Yeah,
So we're saying leave it as it is in the zoning code for the district that it's in?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, that just seems to me to make sense.
Yeah, if you look at the kind of the historical platting around the two lakes, they look very similar.
Yeah,
And it affects everything out 1,000 feet from it.
right.
But does this address the issue of 50-foot lots being split off of properties near the lake?
You would need to be 120 feet wide now to be able to split into two 60s.
And we didn't have very many of those. But, and I don't know that they were necessarily congregated heavily around the lake. Let's put it that way. It was, to some degree, it was the issue of, since the DNR standard is 75 feet, and certainly much higher lot sizes, that we were already, 15 feet below that. So going another 10 feet, it's deviating quite a bit just from that standard. And we have so many water issues we hear about every time someone comes with a lot split request. I can't remember one where we haven't gotten input on, the
Right.
water issues. So it just seemed reasonable to maybe tread cautiously in the shoreland overlay.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess my point was that, if we're changing it to 50-foot width, are we, to be clear about it, are we saying we're going to keep it at 60?
In the shoreland overlay.
In the shoreland overlay. So there does have to be a shoreland overlay table that says, keep it what it is
Right,
right now. Don't lower the amount.
Yep.
Yeah.
right.
Okay, good. That's clear to me then.
And that was a clean way of doing it that Eric
Yep.
came up with, rather than try to somehow word it somewhere else or just not lower it anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I like that.
Okay.
Okay, the other one I have in my staff report was a similar way to address it, but I don't know if it's the same large impact. But it was noted that in our use table, townhomes are allowed in MU1, essentially our downtown. And that may not be appropriate everywhere, but then we were also talking, along 7th, maybe there are some places that's available. So we do have a downtown overlay district that does not include all of MU1. And by adding this language on the bottom of this page would say that you can't have townhouses within the overlay district, but you could have townhomes in the MU1 that's outside of the overlay district.
Right.
Mhm.
That seems clean to me.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
So, Eric, are you comfortable then with kind of noodling through the lot area? Or are we going to keep the lot area the same as the underlying district as well in the shoreland? I mean, I would think we would, but I just want to make sure.
So that's a good point. Now, and it's good that Councilmember Worm brought this up. The lot area, at least for single family, would be the same as R2 today. But there are quite a few lots that are R1 in the Shoreland Overlay District. So their lot area would actually be allowed to be smaller. You know, today the minimum lot area for R1 is 7,920 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
With this table, R1 could go down as far as what the current R2 standard is, but the 60-foot lot width is
Okay.
essentially the controlling factor.
Okay,
You know,
I
you
did
would have to
notice.
have 120 feet today to be able to split.
Yeah, I noticed that the lot area was smaller, so I actually did wonder about that. I don't have a problem with it.
But to Mr. Gelman's point, that means in the R1, the duplexes are not changed as much. It's increased from 7,960 to 11,934 here, but it's not double what the existing R1 is. It's double what the existing R2 is. Am I hearing a consensus we're okay with that? That doesn't mean we can't revisit it at the public hearing, but that would be what I would put together to bring
Could you say
forward.
that again, Eric, please?
Sure. So let's see if I can use my highlight tool. Table right there for duplex. That's double the R.
You're not, excuse me, you're not showing anything if you're trying to show us something.
Yeah.
The highlight didn't show up.
None of it's showing up. We're all looking at pictures right now, unless
We're
I'm the only
saying
one.
gallery.
Oh.
Gallery, yeah.
I see. Let me take care of that then. How's that?
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. So I highlighted this this here in duplex. Can you see that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is double the single, but the single lot area is based on the R2, not the R1. The current R1 is 7,960 or 920, whatever it is. So this duplex area is larger than what the current R1 is, but it's not double the R1 because we're doing the area based on the R2. So this, for a duplex, that would increase, you know, whatever that works out to be. That basically increases the lot area by about 4,000 square feet from what it is today in the R1.
That's in the non-riparian area.
Well, what we would do based on what we were talking about is we're going to get rid of the
riparian?
riparian columns,
I see.
and then we'd only have the non-riparian. And we'd remove the non-riparian language. It would just simply be shoreland, lot area, lot width. But just the way the shoreland is structured, it would really be the new R1 lot area would be the minimum lot area for R1 zoned properties. You know, to Mr. Worms, Commissioner Worms' point, I need to figure out what that prorated amount to shrink that from 7,960 square feet. Now, let's just say it's 7,000 square feet. The more restrictive of the underlying zoning district and the overlay district apply. So if the new R1 is going to be 7,000 square feet, when an R1 property comes in for division, the new R1 lot area would be the more restrictive and apply. If an R2 property comes in, this single lot area is the same as the existing R2. So we won't be creating any new lots in the Shoreland district that are smaller than the existing R2 standards.
Mhm.
For duplexes, the R1 standard would be less than this 11,934 square feet. So that would be what regulates a duplex lot area. Everybody good with that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it might be worthwhile if we change the table so it corresponds to our districts. If we can do that, rather than have it being single, duplex, triplex, quad.
I will noodle on that. The one thing I like about the way the Shoreland is, it's essentially silent to commercial or institutional or even multifamily. You know, that it only applies to single, duplex, triplex, quads. If we I guess I'd have to look at all the different zoning districts that are in the Shoreland ordinance and then, you know, make sure that we're doing something that doesn't affect all the zoning districts. That's the advantage of doing it this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. If you could, you know, maybe think that through and see if that'd be great.
I mean, the alternative
I can see the value either way. You know,
the alternative is we can make the duplex either the new R1 area, or we could make the duplex area the same as the single. You know, we could always just change this 11,934 to be the 5,967. If you're uncomfortable that this is preventing duplexes that are allowed today, we can just change that number.
Yeah. I guess some of it for me is, you know, what are we trying to accomplish with it? Going back to, you know, we're trying to preserve the lake.
There is more impervious surface with duplexes, you know, double garages, typically larger footprints.
Yep.
So making them be larger lots, there's a rationale for that.
Yep.
I'll just mention, I took a look at the zoning map and it looks like the only districts with properties in the Shoreland overlay are the R1, and there's a couple of properties in the MU2. So it's just essentially single family dwellings. The only question I had was on the quad, because I'd have to go and look, and I probably should have looked at how we define a multifamily unit. And it could be more than 3. I don't know for sure. I mean, maybe we can, when we go through the definitions, we can double check that, unless you did.
Yeah, no, I did. I mean, I think a triplex and a quad really falls in the townhouse definition.
Yeah. So maybe we can just kind of use that reference that people understand.
Yeah,
You know?
I'm fine with that. I mean, I can change, single would be single family that we have.
Yeah.
I could change duplex to 2 family, and I could combine triplex and quad and call it townhouse.
Yeah. So, something maybe that's more comfortable for everyone.
I'm fine with that. I can make
Oh,
that
yeah,
change.
fewer things to translate from one to the other,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me as well, too.
Okay.
Just, generally, when we're looking at some of the, what would be the larger lot requirements, in actual practice, with as few properties as there are, I mean, we would be basically hypothetically talking about somebody combining multiple lots, right, in order to even get close to these numbers, I would imagine. Is that correct?
Not
Do a
necessarily.
No.
No, I think there's a number of lots that are pretty large.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of 2 or 3 of them on Silver Lake.
Okay.
There are also, I believe, 3 vacant lots that are in the riparian area.
Couple
Okay.
Or
acres.
riparian or within the 1,000 feet.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. If we were talking about things that were probably never going to happen.
Theoretical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make those
Pretty-
adjustments to the table, and I don't like to purposely set up a public hearing where we know we're going to change, but this isn't set in stone. You'll get another opportunity to take a look at this and say scrap it or change it or whatever. But I think you gave me feedback of how to tweak this to basically keep it close to the existing standards.
Yeah, and simple.
Mm-hmm.
So then we talked about downtown. I think the consensus is we're okay with this language to eliminate townhomes in the or in the overlay district. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So next is the use table. I highlighted in red where you could probably see here in the schools. Those are the changes since our last meeting. So schools in elementary, they were permitted in MU 1, 2, and 3. They would be conditional. Am I missing a page here? No, okay. I looked, there are no existing funeral homes in R3, so just eliminate funeral homes from any of the residential districts.
Okay.
For planned unit development, there are additional standards for planned unit development. They're not in the supplemental regulation section. So instead of just putting an X there, I pointed out the section that they'll need to look at for additional regulations.
That's good.
Then in surface parking, we didn't have as an accessory use surface parking in the MUs. Everybody knows you have surface parking with your businesses, so added them as permitted. And then here, to Commissioner Worm's point, I will revisit the R1 lot size to prorate that decrease in lot size with the width. But what I did was I added this asterisk that you need to consult the Shoreland ordinance, because likely the Shoreland ordinance widths will be larger, and I'll probably end up asterixing on the minimum lot area as well. But the change really to this page was pointing out that, you know, the Shoreland ordinance may apply and is more restrictive. So, you know, consult that. Okay. And then instead of having a 0 lot size, I just changed it to 1 to acknowledge that it would have size, but try not to get into, you know, particularly downtown, there's a lot of really small and really narrow lots. So
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to go through the next sections. Since the first one is definitions, I am going to mention that Chair Barton had emailed me what I thought were really some pretty good suggestions. So I'm actually going to open up that document and ask Chair Barton to kind of go through and explain what you do. Now, to your benefit, this looks a little different than your email because I did go through and I did their consistent red lining to show what was added and what was cut. But with that, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, no problem. This really had to do with the front yard definition that is mentioned somewhere further in the packet, but it's really a definitional issue. So the way the front yard is currently defined, you can see it essentially describes the setback area only. So it doesn't include any additional portion of the actual area in front of, between the house and the lot line. So, and that can create issues because we refer to front yard so often in our codes, including for things like outdoor storage, where you can and can't store things on your property. So it seemed to me that it made more sense to define the yard the way it should be defined, which is based upon a measurement from the lot line to the nearest point of the principal structure. So I just fiddled around with some of it and thought I would address the setback definition, which we already have, and just added a couple words to it, which mirror what's in the subsequent definitions for the front setback, side setback, and so forth. Then I just defined a setback area, because we do refer to a setback area in another portion of the zoning code. So I just took the language from the second sentence of how we currently define yard and put it, and that's the definition of the setback area. It's all that land that falls within how far you have to be when, for structure purposes, what you have to leave open. You cannot put a structure on it or in it, and it's all defined by distance from the lot line, the appropriate lot line, whether it's the side yard lot line or the front or the rear. And then I just really reduced the yard definition down to the open space on a lot, inclusive of the setback area. So I'll use an example. My home is, let's say, 30 feet from the front lot line. The setback area is that portion up to 25 feet from that lot, from the lot line. That's what has to be unoccupied. I can't put a structure any closer than that. But the other 5 feet is still part of my front yard. So for my front yard, if I took the 5 additional feet between my house and the end of the setback area, plus the 25-foot setback area, it's 30 feet. So And that's what it used to be. That used to be our standard, was 30 feet. So we kind of goofed it up by reducing our setbacks. And that made these particular definitions a lot more important. They've always been important, but because we're specifically defining them, we have to be really clear about what area we're talking about. So then the front yard would become the portion of the yard located between the front line of the principal building and the front lot line. Relatively simple.
The other advantage of this too is that it might be helpful for structures that are non-conforming.
Yes.
In that there's certain things that are allowed to encroach in yards and other things that are not.
Right.
And you know, if you had a house that was 20 feet from the front property line, now the front yard is only 20 feet, not 25. The structural setback is still 25. You can't build a building within the 25, but there's things like decks or sidewalks or other things that say you can't. Well, sidewalk's not a good example, but there's other extensions or improvements that are not allowed in yards that now you'd be able to go up to the front of your house with that.
Yeah.
By this definition. But structures or buildings, structures here in particular with this addition, they still need to meet the setback.
Right.
But other landscaping, items you can now have maybe in front of the setback if you're not conforming, but not in front of your house. So I like this and support this, but we wanted to bring this to your attention. That
we do have a number of houses that are set diagonally. They face the corner of a lot rather than straight on, and
so the line would be from the nearest point.
And it actually always has.
So if it's a north-facing lot with the front of the lot to the north, and the house is built with what I think of as the front of the house is northwest.
It would be the line of the northernmost point of the house.
And that would be the setback, so they would have to conform.
No, this is just yards.
Just yard.
Just yards. Setbacks are still setbacks.
Okay.
The setback is always the area that was required to be the open space. You had to meet the setback. We confused, I think, a lot of people by using that same terminology for what the yard is.
Correct.
So this just cleans it up. And also, because we use the term front yard so often, we just have to be careful how we define this.
Yep.
The other thing I added was the very last thing, was just yard required. And then just reference setback area, because there may be some areas where we might use the term required yard.
I did a search of the ordinance. I didn't find any, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't in the future. So yeah. I think it's fine to.
Yeah. It just seemed one of those things to add. So I sent it to Eric because I couldn't understand why we were defining the front yard as essentially only consisting of the setback area. That it didn't make any sense to me, because most people have yards larger than that or deeper than that. So I just really wanted his feedback to try to see if this would potentially work. So that's the rationale.
25 feet. just trying to figure mine out. I'm on a curve. I don't even have, it's a strange spot.
Yeah, we do have some of those.
Yep.
It doesn't really change anything.
Yeah.
The one thing that did happen, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years ago, is there was a resident who made the argument to the city that a particular standard didn't apply to him because his front yard was only that 25 feet from the lot line up, and his home was set back, I don't recall even how many feet from that. And so he was arguing the definition of his front yard. And that to me was kind of indicative of we need to straighten this up a bit. So code enforcement doesn't need to try to figure this out or unnecessarily, deal with potentially contentious issues because of confusion in the language.
So what I'll have Lisa do is email this out as well, so you can, spend a little bit more time looking at it between now and if we, the next meeting or when we schedule the public hearing. But Chair Barton, I think you did a good job of describing, what the intent is. It looks like a lot, when you look at all the redlining, but
Yeah.
it's really very minor in how it's going to affect people. And
The biggest, it's really not going to affect people, really. Really, all it did, the biggest change was taking that second sentence out of the definition of a yard, and just creating the setback area definition.
Yep.
That's really the biggest change, and then adding, just tweaking
Yep.
the rest of it.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll go back to the packet. So then we'll review the other definitions. As you probably noticed, there's a lot less red than the last time because, throughout the document, we accepted everything we, reviewed and kind of okayed the last time. From this point forward in the document, we're only highlighting changes that I've made based on the comments I received at our last regular planning commission meeting. So banks and financial institutions, it was pointed out that it says does not include payday loan businesses. The suggestion was I could define payday loan institutions separately in the code. I'm a little uncomfortable doing that if we're not going to put it in the use table that we want those. In addition, I like to, if the definition exists somewhere else, like state statute, I like to just reference that state statute, because if the state statute ever changes their definition, then we don't have to change our code. We wouldn't be out of date with them. So the state actually defines these. There isn't a payday loan in state statute. There's a currency exchange. That is the license you would need to get if you wanted to operate a payday loan business in the state of Minnesota. So that's how I address that comment. At this point, I'm going to pause a little bit when I talk about a change, but if I don't hear any comments, we'll just move on, and you guys can, mention if you want to talk further about it. It was pointed out there wasn't a dwelling cottage while we're proposing that use. So I basically borrowed language from the purpose statement of the cottage ordinance here to define it. So this was a change that I brought up, that I was uncomfortable with the way the old front lot line definition was set up, which was essentially the narrowest street. So this one, I basically made these 3 points. It could be one of these three, either the shortest street. That will probably work for almost every single family residential zoning district. But for a lot of other uses, that might not be where the most people think the front is. So then it could be where the primary entrance of the principal structure is located other than on that shortest street. The zoning administrator can determine which lot line is the front lot line. And then finally, previously there was a corner lot of equal size could be determined by the owner. This change is just clarifying more than one street frontage. You know, it might not be a corner, it might be a double frontage where the front and the back both are street frontages. Anything with more than one frontage that are of equal size, it shall be determined by the zoning administrator instead of by the owner.
So the difference, item 2, the second one, if the primary entrance faces a frontage other than the shortest, then it could be either. In other words, it says it may be determined by the zoning administrator. Who else could determine it?
Well, so I'm kind of borrowing the language, the second one that was already there, and it said it was determined by the owner. I'm a little uncomfortable about that. Could be determined by the planning commission or the city council, but then that means I need to bring it forward to a city council meeting to make that determination.
Well, it doesn't say, I guess my question really had to do with, it doesn't say that it will be or shall be designated by the zoning administrator. So
Well, if the zoning administrator doesn't designate it, then it really falls back to one. One is the standard.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that in my own mind.
Yep. So like if you own a single family residence and you have your door facing the long side of the street, if you're fine with keeping your front be the short side of the street, that's what the code would do. If you want to come and ask the zoning administrator, I want my front yard to be the side house spaces, then the zoning administrator will make that determination.
Okay.
But in the case of like Anchor View Apartments, I think it's 3rd Street is the front yard just because 3rd Street's the shortest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the building faces the new Anchor Drive.
Yeah.
You know, Anchor Drive should be the front, not 3rd Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Eric, before
Yes.
you go on, can we go back one page?
Sure.
You've got, I just noticed this, it was a flag lot. And it doesn't take into consideration the situation on lakes where the desirable, you know, I mean, you get flag lots going both directions, both, you know, one being on the street side of it and the other being on the lake side of it. And I think we ought to be considering both. Not having less frontage on a public right-of-way than a typical, because you can end up with 2 flags if somebody takes a lot and splits it, you know, one facing the lake with a lot of land and the other having a lot of land on the street.
Okay, this is a good point in that I don't want to delay implementing a lot of these changes, but what we have not reviewed yet is the subdivision ordinance. And there are hopefully a couple of minor things, but there are some things we need to clean up in the subdivision ordinance. that's really where flag lots kind of get addressed more than in zoning. I think that's a good thing to note, but I guess what I'd suggest is, can we wait until we review the subdivision ordinance and revisit this definition, kind of like we talked about short-term housing or short-term rentals. We won't put that definition in now. We'll revisit when we address that ordinance.
Okay,
I think it's a very good point, but without making changes to the subdivision ordinance, just changing the definition is just going to change the definition. It's not going to actually implement, I think, what you would like to achieve.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Sounds good. Yep.
Let me just write that down so I don't lose the flag lot issue.
Thanks.
And then one last thing I would say, we're Minnesotans, we're polite. I know my voice can carry. If I am too loud for people on Zoom meetings, please tell me, because that's the tough thing too. Sometimes I can't tell what the volume is on the other side. But since I haven't heard anything, I'll proceed as I have. Well, I passed it already, but I guess there's one that I realize I didn't address. We had the definition of a coffee shop, and I don't remember who, somebody mentioned that the coffee shop definition didn't address drive-through facilities. And maybe I'll go back to drive-through facilities. I did not change the coffee shop because the way the ordinance works, the drive-through facility is essentially treated like a accessory use. It's any business can have a drive. We call it actually drive-in or self-service business. Any business could have a drive-in. So there wasn't any point of adding, if I had a drive-in to coffee, I'd have to have drive-in to bank, I'd have to have drive-in to restaurant. Drive-in's an accessory use. So a drive-in is addressed for coffee shops, but it's also addressed for restaurants or any business. Nowadays, even some dry cleaners want drive-in. We have drive-in or self-service standards. They apply to all businesses. So we don't need those, in individual business definitions.
Okay. Before you go too far, on page 36 of 97 and 42 of 97, we've got the definitions for natural environment lake and recreational development lake. Do we want to reference the state statutes rather than making our own definition?
I will double check, but I believe it does. That was at least the intent. That we don't have a separate definitions section, or at least we shouldn't in the Shoreland. We put all the definitions in one place, but I can make a note to double check that.
Okay, yeah, on page 26 of the definitions, that's when natural environment lake is defined. And, if we referenced it just to the statute.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And same thing with recreational environment or recreational development.
Let me consult that, because I'm not sure that those definitions are in statute. They might be in rules, and I might be able to cite the rule, but let me double check that I do actually have something, but I get your point. And I'll double check.
Good. Thank you.
Eric? Before you go, I'm looking at farmers market, so it's quite a ways back, page 27 of 97. And it says the sale, selling, or offering for sale at retail of vegetables or produce. Isn't vegetable a type of produce? Wouldn't like that be encompassed in produce?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You would think so. And it does also seem weird. I don't know if the intention was produce was meant to mean fruit, but you know, if produce is all encompassing, I think your point is remove vegetable or just leave it be produce, correct?
Sure. I would also maybe consider other products that are sold at the farmer's market, like dairy, meats. It tends to be a little bit more broad.
Flowers.
Yeah, kind of agricultural products, and then folks kind of have their value added products as well. So,
okay.
Agricultural aspect of it would be a one to include. You know, the agricultural products. That's a nice way to put it. But I know we've had honey and people sell all kinds of things.
Yeah. And I'm assuming nobody's objecting to that. We want to allow that. Okay. I will work on looking at the types of products listed here for sale. Thank you for that. So retail sales, we talked about the kind of the clumsiness of where it said and or, you know, other places. I think it was personal services. It was listed like that sentence that the use may include accessory services. So hopefully that addresses that comment, which was a good comment.
Good clarification.
And then schools, all I did was add the pre in front of the kindergarten, just to clarify that that's an important part of educational facilities now.
Before we go on, I just wanted to zip back to one, and you don't have to go to the page, but it's the lot line 0 definition, and it only references the side yard. It's on page 24 if you're going back. And I wondered if we would reference the front yard or not.
Or does it need to reference a direction at all?
Yeah, does it have to reference any particular side?
Right.
Okay.
I think my gut reaction would be just the reduction to 0 of a yard setback, or maybe even just a setback.
Yeah. Well, it references lot. So, yeah, any setback.
I believe I was on 40.
You're like around 43 or something like that, I think. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Oops. Could you go to, oh, no, you're still, could you go to 42? Some of these, because I read through them, something stood out, and that is wait a minute, I'm sorry. Nope. I have to get to 52, so keep going.
Okay, we're almost there.
Yeah. There's 2 page numbers on here, so that I sometimes look at the wrong one. There we go, it's a standard. Definition of a standard. Did we want to really say a preferred or required level of quantity, quality, or value? I mean, some standards are requirements. Some are preferences. And you know, it's just one of those, I mean, what do we really mean a standard is?
I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm perfectly fine with changing it to what you want. I don't know why, it's written the way it is. You think would be better with being required? I'm perfectly fine.
I don't mind the preferred, because sometimes, they're not requirements, but sometimes they are requirements. And that's what I was getting at. When we say the following standards apply, if we just consider, well, they're just all preferences, so I don't have to do it. That was my thinking. When you define words, I mean, they matter.
I agree with you. I'm just saying I don't have an alternative reason of why it should stay as is. So you want required, I'm more than happy to change it.
Well,
Should it be or?
That's what I said. I preferred or required level.
Yeah, preferred and desired seem like they're too similar, right? Words to, I think, required. That adds a whole other, sort of option there. So I think that works well.
Works for me.
And I'll stop you on this page.
On the page 56, sorry.
Yes. Traffic sight distance.
Yes.
In our landscaping section, our area, our range is 2.5 feet to 10 feet above curb level. So I'm just wondering about this one, that it gives the 7 feet above the grade of the street. I'm wondering if we're in sync here, or if we should somehow get these two to match up.
If I could, I get your point, and if there isn't a good traffic engineering reason to keep it at 7 feet, I'll change it to 10. But I'm thinking like signs, like street signs, they're not always 10 feet tall. So
right,
I would like to consult with my traffic engineers to make sure that there aren't, because this is vegetation and other materials. I want to make sure that there isn't, signage or something else that we'd put in that might be between that 7 and 10 feet.
Yeah, I was wondering
because you're saying the landscape already addresses vegetation is not going to be, short or within the 2.5 to 10. But let me just check to make sure there's not other objects that traffic control would like in between that 7 and 10 feet.
Well, yeah, when it said just are to be protected, and I wondered if there was a way to, word it that would provide that as more of a range than these are the lowest and highest limits. That's it. It's all within this range. Maybe there isn't.
Okay. Is it okay if I check with my traffic engineers just to make sure that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Anyone have the picky one I have here under use category? I just think it should end with in a zoning district. Instead of in a zone.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually going the other way. I was wondering if in a zone means anything. Could it just end at the use is permitted?
That's true. It could end right there. The use is permitted. Yeah. I mean, it is by zoning. We do it by zoning district, but
why have extra words?
Why put words if you don't need them?
Right.
one thing I also was going to offer when I don't see you, so I don't know if you're writing anything, so.
I am, but I'm almost done. Okay.
Okay, and that is under variance. In the last sentence, after, no, I'm sorry, second line, after practical difficulties, because this is really not well understood, is I wonder if we could put a comma after practical difficulties and just say as defined in state statute. Because it has a definition. And
yes, it has a definition. Where I jumped when I read this is trying to clarify that it's property, not use.
Yes, and I was getting more at the practical that what a practical difficulty is, because many times there is a feeling that the city's just kind of making these rules up. And it's our rules, and it's not. It's the state statutes that dictate what a practical difficulty is. So that's really what I wanted to try to reference in here. You don't have to do it. It just seemed to me not a bad thing to do. Just reinforce.
Here's why I'm pausing. I don't know every in and out of your variance, but communities are allowed to develop criteria for variances that are more restrictive than the state statute.
Yeah.
And if I put in state statute here, then that would contradict your variance standards if they are more restrictive.
They're not.
But they might
never will be.
I really don't think they ever will be. I'd be very surprised.
But the way it's written now, there's flexibility for us as a city. If we put the statute in.
If we wanted to change them, we could make them stricter. That's what I don't see us doing.
Well, I don't see us doing that either today, but if you to reference the state, you don't have the flexibility to do it in the future.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to, and to Councilmember Blee's comments, I think that's that's adding a purpose, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem like we need to do that.
Yeah, oh no, I wasn't saying we needed to. It was just one of those things that occurred to me because of what we've heard at variance hearings.
Well, I guess what I would say is, if you want to add that language, we'd add this language. When I go to council, I would point that out specifically, that the Planning Commission wanted to make it clear we're not going to be more restrictive than the state statute. So if you're comfortable with that, I'm fine, but I think I would want to point out, substantive changes to the code, and I think that would fall into that category.
No, I understand your concern, and that's okay.
Yep.
To me, it wasn't going to change anything other than as an educational piece. Yep. So that's fine. I don't have a problem with it as is.
Okay. Is that the consensus? We'll leave it as is for the rest of the group?
Okay. Yes.
As usual, Elaine, you make good points.
Yes, I think it's a very good point as well.
It's always good to discuss these things.
Okay, so we'll be moving into the accessory dwelling units next, but I guess I'll just pause to make sure nobody else had a definition they wanted to address.
Now, if somebody wants to or thinks of something, they can still certainly email
Yes,
you, with, oh, this occurred to me.
exactly.
Or if they spot some spelling error or missing word or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for accessory dwelling units, I guess it's not red. The only thing I got here was eliminated only.
You know, go back if you would. I'm sorry, but when this is ready, we're not going to have the definition included here.
No.
Correct, because we've already defined it.
Correct.
So
It
we
was
don't
just putting it. It was just putting together for our review. You're right. This will
Perfect.
be.
Okay.
This would be, you know,
Yeah.
not. It wouldn't be in this section. It would be in the definition section.
So then when we go, if we go down to D and attach,
C is in cat.
D is in David.
Okay.
So here we're talking about an attached, right? And then we come down to what the associated principal dwelling unit must contain.
Mm-hmm.
So then it does that, but then right below, then there's another sentence, and then right below, bulleted under the next one, is a detached accessory. And I wondered if we can, you know, lump the attached and the detached together. Because they seem to be intermixed a little bit here. I had to read a couple times. It was just read through it again and, you know, on your spare time. But like I say, it was just one of those, the item, let me find it down there. Like item H seems to apply to the attached, you know, when it's within a principal building. But item F above that is for detached. So they seem to be sprinkled, and I thought maybe we could just put them, if it applies to the attached only, put those together, and then the detached only, put those together, if they can be separated that way. Just a thought.
It takes some pretty careful reading.
It did. I had to keep thinking about, wait a minute, am I reading about detached or attached here?
I will put some time into it. Any substantive change? You don't like sizes? You don't like amounts? No? Okay.
I think we talked a lot about that the last time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Can you help me understand why two-family dwelling would only be able, zoned in R1, would only be able to have one dwelling, no more than one, the A?
Yeah, sure. So that's essentially prohibiting 3 units on a lot. So if you have a single family house, you can have a accessory dwelling to make 2 units on a lot. If you have a duplex on an R1, you already have 2 units. So if you have a duplex, you cannot have an ADU as well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Are accessory ADUs, or are they allowed on R2 lots?
I believe they are, but let me go back to that. I'm just remembering I'm on page 62.
Because then R2 would also be, R2s have like two family dwellings as well. So would they also be included in that as only having no more than one?
Give me 1 second to find it. I think it's in accessory. So accessory dwelling units are allowed in R1, R2, and R3. But the restriction that you pointed out is only R1. So a R2 zone district essentially could have 3 or maybe even possibly 4 units on a lot, because this restriction of not allowing a ADU on a duplex only applies to the R1, while ADUs are allowed in R1, R2, and R3. Which makes sense. That's kind of the fundamental of different residential zoning districts. The lower numbers are less intense than the higher numbers. But I compliment you. You're reading this well. You are, you're seeing this and you're understanding, how to interpret it. But as written, if you have a duplex on an R2, you could apply for a conditional use permit for an ADU as well.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Eric, maybe you could just do a quick comment on how that relates to the density limits in each zoning district. In other words, the number of dwelling units.
That's a good point. So, our zoning districts are guided by our comp plan land uses, and our comp plan land uses have, increasing densities. The discussion about changing the R2 lot size was to implement the minimum lots, the minimum density, not the maximum. Allowing ADUs on an R2 would implement that density range within the land use district. Chair Barton, is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, it was more ideally, the density is really the number of dwelling units per acre of land. So the R1 has the lowest maximum density. I mean, the ideal is you within that range, at least hit the minimum.
Yep.
I mean, that's more difficult sometimes to do in the R1 with large lots because it's one dwelling unit, potentially per every 10,000 feet. So it's hard to increase the density there. It's easier in the R2 and the lots where we already allow multiple family dwellings, with greater density.
Good point. Okay, so we have the parking ordinance next.
Under the definition of trailer weighted, second set, oops.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Second sentence, after gross vehicle weight, it should be that is, not are. Its trailer is singular.
Okay.
I just want to point it out rather than email.
That is fine.
And again, we're not intending to include the yard definition or the front yard definition in this section.
Correct. So I would modify, the definitions to match. Mm-hmm.
So it really starts on page 65, the actual ordinance.
Yep.
Okay.
So we added the reference to 72.04, where there are additional parking standards outside of the zoning ordinance.
You know, on this page, under 3A, the sentence, third line, each space shall be adequately served by access drives, etc. I wonder if that couldn't be incorporated into the access category at the top of the next page. We have an actual little sub-bullet for access. Parking loading space shall have proper access internally and from a public right-of-way. I mean, that's essentially what that other sentence is saying. And I think it says, does it say, and it could say as determined by well, it does say as determined by the zoning administrator.
So that could be just eliminated.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the one on page 65 is primarily getting at, any access drive, which could be internal within a parking lot.
That is true.
Maybe you could say, have on the next one, just say have a proper access internally and from a public right of way. Then we can just eliminate that other sentence.
Comment on page 56.
Can you give me 1 second just so I can note?
Okay, yeah.
Change. Thank you.
Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Okay.
Did you mean 66 out of 97 or 50?
It's 66 out of 97, 50.
Okay.
It's labeled as page 56 on the on the bottom as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I keep mixing them up myself.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry, which page do you want?
66 of 97.
Okay.
Or the...
Right there.
Okay. Under F, every time I read this paragraph, it seems like it's really talking about two different things. And so after the first sentence, I'd propose making that a separate paragraph, underground bonus parking. It seems like the two together, it's even written out in a way that it, I'd expect it to be as a new paragraph, a separate paragraph.
Did it used to be?
Maybe, it might have just got joined in.
Yeah.
But it seems like they're different enough that having them separate makes sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. I mean, they are two different things.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on this page?
It almost seems like it should be a subtopic because they're related. Should it a sub-I under F?
Okay.
Well, okay, sure, that's fine.
All right. Any other comments on this page? Then we go to the tables. And so here, I know a couple people mentioned some of these sections, but Chair Barton, I know you had specific clarifications you wanted on where the vehicles are compared to just the spaces. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if we got close to the mark on this.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think so. Let me see where I think the one I was referencing was the new 10 feet from the curb or street, edge of street, right? I have to look for it.
That may be the next page.
And I think you put it in the table,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
just under each one, which, works.
Yeah, I guess we just didn't highlight it in the table. I don't know if maybe that's a table feature, but
Yeah.
correct.
And the item on the next page, what is it down there? 6, where it does talk about the not encroaching on the alley or public sidewalk.
Yep. That's acceptable to you?
It cleans it up, I think.
Good.
Comment on that same page, FI. We're talking about driveways, authorized parking areas, and authorized garages. I refers to it as if there's always going to be a garage door, whether there's a building there or not.
Right.
And so if we have a driveway coming up to an authorized parking area that is not a garage, it doesn't have to come up to a door.
I thought we had said that should read, lead to and abut a vehicle access door having a width of at least 8 feet or an authorized parking area.
Yeah, that would solve it.
To address that very,
Yes.
that it doesn't have to go to a garage door.
So this is like people that finish their garage off to a room and still have the spot in front of it.
Well, that's not exactly this. This
It's
really,
the opposite.
it's the opposite.
No.
They don't have a garage, so their driveway can't abut a garage door because they
Okay.
don't have a garage.
Well, it could, but it'd be kind of pointless.
Well, not if they don't even have a garage. Well, yeah, I guess you could just prop a garage door up in your yard.
Yeah.
That
Well,
actually,
I don't think that was the intent.
no, it wasn't, but it's been we've talked about this for a bit. And it actually did come up one time when I just personally didn't think it should even be applicable because there was no garage planned.
Yeah. I can't think whoever, started writing this, but my reading of this, the intent is you can't have a garage with a garage door and no driveway,
Yeah,
which there are some places where that happens. So
Yeah.
I think that's what was trying to be addressed, but
Yeah.
unintended consequences, very good comment.
Sometimes we can, and this is what happens, is these these standards and even the definitions, they really just get read word for word. And if this is what it says, this is what it means,
Mm-hmm.
even if it doesn't seem to make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good exercise. I was only going to comment on the off-street parking that I think at some time in the future, this will be another one of those to-do items once these changes are made, is to address some of our non-residential parking standards.
Okay.
Including, the requirements, the minimum requirements. We've talked about that for a bit as well, and it's a big one to attack. I don't think it needs to be done right now. I think there's a little more flexibility in those, but not a lot in some cases.
All right. I'm sorry. All we did on this page was make that kind of circular reference of there's also parking standards or vehicle standards in the zoning ordinance. So we're on to downtown, and we actually already talked about this red line in kind of the staff report. This would prohibit the townhomes within the overlay district.
Right.
So is there any other item? Well, so this was actually new. We previously were not reviewing the downtown overlay district. I only added this to highlight that change that we talked about in the staff.
So the rest of this is the way it is now.
Yep, correct.
Okay.
Then the next section we have is the planned unit development. This is just indicating that it's going to go in the table. So this will get X'd out and won't actually be added into the ordinance. So really at C at this point will be added. The one thing I'll pause here, I guess, to see if there's any concerns.
The only thing on here is those at the bottom of this page. Those are related to the text amendment that we just had the public hearing on.
Yep.
Okay.
So that will be modified per
Right.
that text amendment.
Okay. And these are all going to, this is just a formatting question, and I'm sure that this is what will happen, but this will all get formatted so that it's the indentation and the numbering is all aligned, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, what happens next is this all gets turned into a physical ordinance. And I just bring it up because it will then be indented like an ordinance is. The codifier, when they take the amendment, will do all the appropriate nomenclature and indenting and all, etc. But yes, that will be accomplished.
It just is, it's surprising that it's easier to read them when they're formatted the way we're used to seeing them.
Okay, noted.
No, it's okay.
A minor typo on 73 to 97. Probably will get caught in what you were referring to as the final.
On this one, on this page,
Page 73. I just happened to see it. One of the paragraphs is missing, so it just doesn't read clearly.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Blees. For some reason, you're cutting in and out. Can you repeat that?
Item C up from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It's just missing a parenthesis after the letter C.
Yep.
It's a small thing. But it happened to.
interesting when what you spot when you're just perusing sometimes.
I hate to think of having to prove all this. It's difficult to prove.
Yeah, it is. Under number 5, bullet 5 in the middle of the page there, could we make PUD processes? Could we just pluralize that since we have 3 that are listed after that, or lower on? Eric, did you reformat this a bit?
Not intentionally.
Okay. No, I'm just meant the way it flows, because for some reason, it just seemed like it was easier to follow for some, I'm not sure why.
Now than
Yeah.
previously?
Yeah.
No, I wonder if maybe just reading it a couple times it flows better, but no,
Yeah.
I hope I didn't. I didn't intentionally change anything.
Well, if you had, I was going to say, nice.
Well,
Question on this. Under the third paragraph, the planning commission. We'll do the notice 350 feet.
Mhm.
And there, somewhere earlier, on the prior page, it says, it talks about the recommended neighborhood meeting is for people within 500 feet. Why would we have two different numbers? I understand 350 is the minimum, that we have to do, but we're gonna have,
sorry, Chair Barton, I don't have an answer for that.
I mean, would there be harm in making it 500 feet for the?
I wouldn't recommend
I'm not-
expanding the public hearing notice just because we have administrative staff that does that and they do it the same for everyone.
Yeah, my thought is kind of the same thing. I mean, I don't have a problem with the 500 feet, but that's one where if there's a pre-application or a neighborhood meeting, they're going to want to know.
Mhm.
They're going to want to be informed. So should we make that 350 feet, or do we just want to, deal with it?
I think that's a question to the rest of the planning commission. That's completely your judgment.
Yeah.
It's two different things, because one is a legal requirement and one is a recommendation.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, in many cases, the people who would come, if you notify more people for the neighborhood meeting, those are the folks who are going to also show up if they feel strongly about something, and they're going to want to be notified by the city. So I just don't know if it makes more sense to, invite the people who are going to get the subsequent notice when it goes to a public hearing, and let those people contact all their neighbors, all the extra people. I'm just tossing it out there because I do know that if they come, somebody's gonna have to keep them posted. The ones that are outside the 350-foot range.
Well, we've already got an option for the city to determine a larger distance.
Mhm.
Would it make sense to have it consistent at 350 feet? And then maybe the city exercises expanding the area included as appropriate. My thought would be that the larger the PUD, the more important it is to have more people coming. So you might, if you've got a big development occurring, then you want to go out 500 feet or more. Whereas for a small PUD, the 350 may just be fine, and that gives us a little more consistency.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do more. You just don't want to do less. And with a larger PUD, you're going to be, inviting more people anyway, because the property itself is going to be larger. So a lot of people are going to be within X number of feet of some part of that property. The smaller PUDs, it's not, although, sometimes the smaller ones will bring a large contingent. But yeah, I just am hesitant to have that one larger than the public hearing piece, just as a requirement, so to speak.
Sounds good. Anybody have an issue with changing it to 350 feet?
No,
Okay.
I think
No.
it makes sense. You don't want people saying, why did I get notified in one thing and not in the other? So it makes
Right.
sense for them to be the same.
Okay.
Would there be any way we'd want to say something like, at a minimum of 350 feet? That way or maybe we don't have to say it to clarify it that much, I guess, but.
Yeah, I don't think we have to.
Well, it's kind of said after the comma.
Yeah.
For a larger area as determined by the city.
Yeah,
Yeah.
council member wise, if this was, a statutory requirement, I think that would be very helpful. But since this is, something that the city's choosing, I don't know that it has to include that additional language. Okay. Anything else on page 78?
I don't think we made too many other changes even to start with. A lot of it was in the beginning of the purposes and that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're in the alternative neighborhoods, the cottage developments.
Eric, can you look at page 81 of 97?
Absolutely, I can.
Well, let's see, about middle of the page under IV.
Mm-hmm.
Boundary survey prepared by registered surveyor, including the property, and 200 beyond. Assume that should be 200 feet.
You are probably right.
Another one of those quirks I just happened to see.
Good one.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're in the cottage developments. Taking out that the B. And then the parking shall be. So we're townhouses unless somebody had any other comments about cottages. Okay, townhomes.
On page 90 of 97, the requirement on resident open space is a 25%. Just a minute, I gotta find it now. My notes are a little cryptic.
Right at the top.
Yeah, there we go. Townhouse. Each lot shall contain at least 25% usable open space. Is that 25% of the entire lot area?
That's the way I would read it.
Okay. Just for clarity, can we say that?
work?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments in townhomes?
Yeah, could you go to page 91? On the table for mixed use,
Mm-hmm.
did we want to asterisk the not in the D1 overlay or townhouse dwelling? We have permitted for the MU1, but isn't that where we said we don't want them in the, I know we have it somewhere else, but might not hurt to
Yep.
make mention of that here as well, since we've got a table.
Yep.
Anything else for townhomes? Okay, we're on to two-family dwellings. And this is actually the end of the ordinances to review. So any last comments about two-family regulations? Okay, I just saved this. So Chair Barton?
Well, let me just ask if anybody has just any generic comments about what's on the table here as far as moving forward. Comfortable with where it's going?
That's a good question because I guess the only direction I'd like is whether we are comfortable enough to schedule a public hearing for April 1st.
Do you know if we're going to have any other public hearing on the 1st?
Two of the school districts. My intention would be to put the two school districts first because they will have public, mailed public hearing notices.
Mm-hmm.
But this would be the third item.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I prefer not to have is too many lengthy public hearings in the same meeting, but I just don't have a feel for the school district ones. I have no idea what's being proposed.
Yeah. Well,
it's a tough one. I mean, we can schedule it, and then if something comes up or if you get something that indicates, oh no, that's just going to make that meeting.
We can table it. We can, do what we need to. Yeah. I'll go over the two requests in a little bit more detail in the next section of the agenda. But I think if everybody's comfortable where we're at with the language of the ordinance, I can schedule the public meeting, and then, like you said, we can table it, continue it, whatever we do if it gets to be too late in the meeting.
Right.
So are we hearing consensus from the Planning Commission that we're comfortable scheduling the public hearing?
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't mean you can't amend anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to work on a couple things, but that's the time. If there are minor tweaks, they can still be made.
Yeah.
The public hearing.
Right. So I'll just mention this, but it shouldn't affect us. There's, for an ordinance, for a text amendment, there's two public requirements. One is the public hearing notice that would be published at least 10 days before the public hearing. That's for you guys.
Mhm.
The second is that the proposed changes that the city council would adopt need to be posted at City Hall 10 days before the city council acts. So, I don't have a requirement to post that 10 days before the public hearing. So, absolutely, to your point, until the time we publish the packet, we can take comments and make tweaks, anything we need there.
We just wouldn't want anything too substantive because.
No. And
You know.
again, if at the time you view that it was substantive, we can continue the public hearing however we want to process.
Right.
But I don't know whether your point was, but if, I appreciate the eyes on this. If somebody, is looking at this and finds another typo, please email me and we'll correct those.
I mean, ideally, it'll be as clean as possible and reflect, what we've discussed. And this would be one as well, that when our packet would come out, do your best to get through as much of it as you can, just in case you spot something that could be corrected prior to doing the public hearing.
So to kind of clarify what you will see, we turned off all the edits we talked about to kind of simplify this version. I'm going to be turning them back on. But any of these ordinances, like the definitions where there's no changes, you're not going to see them. We're only going to bring forward what has changes by basically the section. So, if there's section G and there's one small change in it, you'll see the whole section G. But all the definitions that aren't changing, they're not going to be in your packet. All sections of any of these ordinances that don't have changes, you're not going to see those. You're only going to see the individual subsections that have changes in a red line format.
And is that what the public will see?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So hold on to the copy you have now.
Yeah.
in case you need it for a reference.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So
And-
I will work with Lisa to prepare a public hearing notice for April 1st.
Okie doke. All righty, thank you. That's a lot of work on staff's part. Appreciate it. Now then we'll move on to reports from staff. So
Okay,
you can take down your screen share if you'd like, so
No
we
problem.
can see you as you speak.
Okay. So there's two applications we've received from the school district. They're both conditional use permits for additions, one to North High School and one to Cowern Elementary. North High School is an addition that will include most of North High School is 3 stories. This will be in addition to the 3-story part of the building. It works out to be about 6 classrooms per floor. There's lab at the top, so I think it's like 15 rooms or something that's being added on to. It's being added on to the northwest corner of the building and to the west. It's going to be added on to the west side of the building. So it's pretty close to a number of residents. That's one of those that we'll publish for the public hearing for the zoning ordinance, but I'll be curious how many people come because it will be quite visible. There are a couple other minor changes to the entrances, mostly to deal with security issues and the like. In doing that, they're also taking some architectural opportunities to change some building materials that, well, are different than they are today. So you'll see it, and we'll need to talk about it. But those are farther from most of the residents. I think this addition is going to be the piece that most people will concentrate on. Cowan Elementary is not as extensive. It's all entrance security issues. It's facing, I'm sorry, is that, I want to say Marigold, but it's not Marigold, it's Margaret.
Margaret,
Yeah. So it's the entrance facing Margaret. So it's not the entrance that the school buses come to. They did have that discussion with us. Just, I'm not sure whether it's budget reasons or not. They think they're going to come in a future year with a different conditional use permit to change the entrance for the buses. But currently, this is kind of the main pedestrian entrance off of Margaret. It adds one office and a restroom, but it really, aside from that, doesn't add any, usable classroom space or anything. Still visible from people on Margaret, but it's a, to a lot of people, it might just look like an architectural refresh. So I'm not sure as much how many people will come to that. But those are the two public hearings that will be scheduled before the zoning ordinance update.
Just a bit of a heads up. When we did the other school, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name right now.
Richardson?
Yeah, Richardson. It was kind of strange because we had COVID and construction and all that, and we had given them I don't know if it was actually a variance, but we reduced the number of parking places that was required. And I kind of watched it as I drive by there, and it seemed like there was a lot of cars being parked out on the street. And I don't know if it was just because of the construction types of stuff and the circumstances. We haven't gotten back to normal to be able to really see that. And I'm concerned that, we get into making the same decision at Cowan and then find out later that, we really do need the parking places. So
well, I hope
I don't have a solution, but
yeah, that's good background. But I hope it looks like we might not have that issue because they are not proposing any changes to their parking stalls. Mm-hmm. And with Good. The exception of a restroom and basically a receptionist office, they're not adding any space that would increase the occupancy. In addition, they hope in the future when they bring a modification for the school buses, they would actually have an opportunity to provide additional parking at that time. But with this proposal, no parking's being, for Cowan, no parking's being reduced and no new occupancy space is being added. So it shouldn't change the parking need.
Okay, good. I'm just kind of waiting on some better information with Richardson once we get back to normal.
Yep.
And see, what does happen there.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily advocating one way or the other on the parking. And so having the additional time will be good.
Yeah, great.
The same thing at Richardson, particularly during the construction, the heavy construction, a lot of workers. You'd see them going to their cars on the street. And then there were times I'd go by and there'd be virtually nobody on the street, but the lot would be filled up. So it was very hard to judge what the real impact was. But now that it's really, the work itself is over. Once the kids are all back in school, it'll be easier, to get a better handle on that. I agree.
Yeah, and I was particularly concerned because there's a lot of on-street parking, and inevitably you can have some kid that wants to kind of zip out between a couple of cars, and that's a safety issue that I wasn't thrilled about.
Now, the high school isn't making, but their changes aren't going to impact their parking, correct?
It will actually a little bit. Because it's basically going towards the parking lot. It's the very narrow parking lot now.
Yeah.
But it will. Doesn't look extensive, but it will be a reduction. It's not adding any, and it's modifying that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Okie dokie. Well, that one will potentially be interesting.
Yeah. I guess I was just going to ask Lisa if she had any updates she wanted to share.
I do not have any tonight.
Chair pardon?
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go down to reports from Council Liaison Wong, if she has anything to report.
Just that the council unanimously voted on the PUD text amendment that everyone had worked on in the previous meeting. So thank you everyone for your work.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions of our council liaison, since we always would pepper Tom with updates on things? Nope. Okay, then we'll move on to reports from commissioners. I'll start with Andrew.
Just real quick one to see if there was any update on the city email addresses.
Question.
I don't have an update other than I know we're working on it. But I don't know a deadline. Lisa and I can check in with the city manager. I know it's been requested. Just for inside baseball, our IT is kind of provided by the city of Roseville, so we'll try to see if we can move that up in the queue, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to add anything, Lisa? I thought.
Yes, I did ask Scott about that last week, and I concur with what Eric just stated in that it's in the works, but unfortunately I don't have any more details than that. So we'll try to get that pinned down.
Yeah. And then if they get established or whatever, you'll just contact each council member with their, I mean, Al, I don't know if Al's is working. Rick, you use your city email?
I don't use it. I did keep it up for a while, but the main thing I was doing was changing the password.
I did.
Little mental exercises going on, huh?
So yours might need to be kind of refurbished, and Al's as well. Mine is fine. So, but you might want to also, check on Rick and Al's just to see if they're still active. Okay.
Will we get eventually when we all have them? I mean, will these be included on the agenda so that we can see each other's address or is that? I mean, I assume it's a public thing, right? What the email addresses are, right? So.
Well, they all have the same format, but there would be no harm certainly in including that. I can tell you what yours will be.
Is it first and last name or how
Yeah.
does it?
Andrew.wise at northstpaul.org.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I must have
Chair
changed it.
Martin,
Yeah.
this might be premature in announcing this, but I do know that in the near future, we will be using Civic Clerk. And so it's a software that we will be able to correspond through, and we'll have our agenda through that and everything else. So I'm not sure how the email addresses are going to play into that, but I know that we're in the process right now of testing that out.
Okie doke. Good.
So
Okay.
it's a collaborative platform for us.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Patrick.
have nothing further.
John,
Nothing.
Rick,
Nothing for me.
nothing for Silver Lake?
Nope, a
Still
little too
frozen.
early for the cleanup. Boy, there were a lot of trucks and cars out on the lake last weekend. I
Really?
bet there were 30 of them out there. And they're all kind of huddled around where the open water usually is. And I thought, oh no, they're gonna go in.
Yikes.
But they were out enjoying the day.
Yeah. Al,
I'm gonna get my second shot on next dinner on Thursday, 18th. I'm not sure how it's gonna react to it yet, so I might be at the meeting, I might not.
oh, okay, at the joint meeting, okay.
Yeah.
Way to go, Al, though. That's good. I just really had a question on process. And that is, I know that there have been some snags with the Zoom meeting, particularly, even with the council and all. So I was wondering if there is a particular time that commissioners could log in early. In other words, not too early, but where, we could maybe establish something that would say, okay, try logging in as of this time. And that way we'd be kind of comfortable that it should be ready for login. I mean, is that something that can be done like 6:20 or 25 or whatever?
Absolutely.
I'm not quite sure. When should I try logging in?
I will plan on starting the meeting at 6:20
Okay.
going forward.
Okay, no, perfect. I just think that might be helpful for everyone, so you're not
Yes.
wondering, am I too early or is it not working? Or
Yes.
all right, that's all I had. So I believe that is all we have. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Al? Al moves and
I'll second.
John seconds. All those in favor will say aye when Lisa calls the roll. Those opposed will say no if they dare. Lisa?
Chair Barton,
Aye.
Commissioner Blees, Commissioner Geldman,
Aye.
Commissioner Mungy,
Aye.
Council Liaison Wong.
Oh, she's not voting.
Okay, I apologize. I wasn't sure. Commissioner Wise,
Aye.
Commissioner Warm.
Aye.
All righty, I'll just remind everybody, we have a meeting the 18th, also at 6:30, joint meeting with the EDA, but we are adjourned at 8:54. You guys in the next couple of weeks. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Aye.
Take care.
Bye.